me a little bit about from a cultural side. You were born and raised in Germany, but you spent a large portion of your life in the United States. How did those two cultures combine or make you who you are today? Because I actually think of them as quite different types of cultures, although this is certainly the Western world. And, if you saw someone, if you were walking down the street in Germany and you look at the people and you look in the United States, very similar looking, type of backgrounds. But I find the mentality to be a little bit different. What's your opinion?
The mentality definitely is very different. In my family, my dad is born 1940, so he was alive during World War II. And when Frankfurt was bombed, I'm from near Frankfurt. He lived through that and going to the bunker. And his parents had a factory, so they were forced to have prisoners of war work at the factory. But they were very like socialists at the time. So for them, the worker from Eastern Europe was closer to them than the politicians in Germany or the army in the Germany at the time. And side fact, a fun fact is actually they remained friends. So my grandparents and the prisoners of war that they had to have employed at their factory remained friends even after the war and exchanged letters. So that's a nice part. But so my dad lived during the war, and then his first impression of was in 1945 when they had to surrender to the Americans and hang out the white bed sheets and towels and surrender. Nobody knew what was happening. And so my dad grew up with a very positive impression of Americans because they were there and, they shared chocolates and magazines and sweets and all these things that, the American camps that were nearby could share. So because of that, my dad also wanted us to really grow up globally. So I went to Frankfurt International School. So I actually did start from preschool, go to this international school where everything was in English. And we had 50 kids from 55 nations in the school, all religions, and about 30% were Americans. So from a very young age, I had exposure to all different types of cultures and that. So for me, the transition to the US was definitely more easy. But yeah, I was 16, and in Germany, you can drink beer with 16. You can go out to certain pubs and places. And in America, it's unheard of. The kids kind of hang out at malls and don't know what to do with themselves. And so also, I don't know, I find that teenagers from Europe are a bit more independent because they're given more responsibility. Even kids from second, third grade, they take the train to school or the bus. Their parents drop them off at the train station. They take the train, or they walk, or they take the bike. I walked and biked my whole life to school. And in the US, you have these big school buses. And even if they're in high school, you have the stop sign coming up to make sure, you have no, which in a way is good to protect the younger kids. But there's the sense of, for me, where I felt like, oh, wow, everyone just felt a bit younger to me than, and with less responsibility. But you have other freedoms in the US, like having a car. So I was like, oh, wow, I'm 16. I don't know if I was 16 or 17, I could drive a car. Like that was so cool. In Germany, you have to definitely, at that time, you have to be 18 and it's very expensive. And then college was a unique experience with fraternities, sororities. We don't really have much of that anymore in Germany. There's some societies, but they're not really popular. Um, and yeah, but I'm an athlete. I have been an athlete. So for me, it was the college sports culture that really got me and that I loved, and which was the driving force of me coming to the States.
I think it's interesting because if I look at my life, like I have so many friends from Germany, like so many, and I get along really, really, really well with Germans, better than any other European nation, like hands down. I have more friends and better relationships with Germans. And sometimes I try to figure that out. Like, what is it about that? And what I've come down to, and and this is just a hypothesis, but I think that the German language is very precise. And when you have a language which is very, very precise, you end up having people who are more purposeful and a little bit more personal responsibility. And they're some people call it directness. I'm not sure it's directness. I think it's just yeah, just purposeful about a lot of these things. And I think I really like that in others, I don't like flighty, people who are all over the place or say one thing and do another thing. Um, I think it's also interesting that if you look at this internationalization space, you have, like people meet like me who do the American and Canadian, world, and then there's several people who do the German speaking population. But that's it. Like you don't see versions of us in, I don't know, Italy or France or Japan or something like that. Or if you do, I've never heard of them. I have no idea who they are. It's like it's the Americans and Canadians who do the Anglo-Saxon, and then you have the Germans, and I think that's the big players in this space. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think Germany is an interesting country because it's, a lot of what people know about Germany is what happened, in the 20th century with World War I and World War II. But if you really look at the history of German people and the German culture in terms of classical music, philosophy, the printing press, all these advancements in science, I mean, it's becoming less and less relevant in science and technology in some ways. It's just a really difficult environment there to be an entrepreneur nowadays. But it's a very rich culture that has a lot to offer. And I think even the German people have always been very structured, very organized, and in how they think and how they approach life. And then with the with since World War II, we've kind of been carrying a lot of heavy weight and our history and heritage with us. And then in terms of politics, it's become more left wing in an effort to almost over liberalize or in many ways. And so I think the need for Germans to find their identity again, to find their freedom, to find their independence, to see, okay, how do we move forward as a people is just very present and very strong. And I think through that need, you have the German people now looking at ways to move on from the past. And politics in Germany, to me, is just all over the place. And it's become very, very left, very, very woke, very unhealthy in many ways of almost like synthetically to try to, overshadow things from the past and versus just finding a healthy way forward. So even like from our taxation system, our freedom system, there's a desperate need to find something that's fair because having to pay we have a tax day or remembrance day, which is sometime in July. So you basically work over 6 months for the government with the amount of taxes and social securities and healthcare that you have to pay, and that's a lot. And where's the money going? What's happening with it? It's just not good things. And Germany being such a driving force in the European Union, or always have been now, our economic growth is not very strong at all. Where I think we're in the last place, but I think it's just the German people trying to find their identity, searching for freedom, searching for all the things that matter. And through that comes this need to explore. And I think a lot of the answers now for me are outside of Germany and outside of the European Union.